She slammed the door behind her, face flushed red with frustration. "You don't care about me at all. I needed that money, and you just sat there doing nothing." Her voice echoed through the living room, sharp and stinging. I sat still, my hands folded, staring at the daughter I once held in my arms, who now stood before me like a stranger. I'd sacrificed so much, quietly, willingly, for her. Rent wasn't the issue. Entitlement was. And as her voice rose, something shifted inside me. She expected me to fold like always. But this time, I had a very different answer. It started gradually, subtle changes in the way she spoke to me, the frequency of her calls, the tone she used when she didn't get her way. My daughter, Emily, was my only child. I had raised her alone after her father left us when she was just 5. I worked 2 jobs, often came home exhausted, and still managed to help with homework, cook dinner, and tuck her into bed every night with a story. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, was for her. I never thought I'd be in a position where I had to remind her of that. At first, I thought the shift in her behavior was normal. She was in her mid-20s now, living in the city, trying to build a life for herself. I assumed the stress of adulthood was hard on her. But as the years passed, her phone calls started sounding more like complaints and demands. "Why can't you just help me out this month?" she'd say, never minding that I was a 63-year-old woman living on a fixed income. "You're retired. What else are you doing with your money?" At first, I did help. Rent, groceries, even car repairs. I wanted her to be safe and stable. I told myself that it was temporary, that once she found her footing, she'd stand tall on her own. But the footing never came. Instead, entitlement grew. And with it, the kindness and gratitude I used to see in her eyes began to fade. 3 weeks before everything came crashing down, she called me crying. "Mom, I lost my job. Again. They said I was late too many times, but that's not fair. I was doing my best." Supportive mother I had always been. She asked if I could cover her rent until she got back on her feet. I told her I'd look at my budget and let her know. When I reviewed my finances that night, it hit me just how stretched I already was. I had pulled from my savings to help her 3 months in a row. My prescription costs had risen, and I was behind on utilities for the first time in over a decade. Something inside me said, "This has to stop." I drafted a message telling her gently that I wouldn't be able to help this time, not because I didn't love her, but because I simply couldn't. Her reply was immediate and fiery. She didn't call, she showed up. Unannounced. She banged on my front door like the house was on fire. When I opened it, she stormed past me into the living room. "Are you kidding me, Mom?" she shouted. "After everything I've done, you can't even help me out with rent? You're sitting on that big house, collecting retirement checks, and you won't give your own daughter a hand?" I stood frozen. Shocked, not because of her words, but the venom in them. She paced the living room, tossing her hands in the air, calling me selfish, accusing me of caring more about my dog than her. It was the first time in my life I had heard my daughter call me selfish. The same woman who worked double shifts for years to afford her piano lessons, prom dress, and college tuition, selfish? I didn't argue. I didn't shout back. I sat down quietly, letting her unload everything. She was angry, embarrassed, and spiraling. I saw it in her trembling hands and the way her voice cracked between rants. After nearly 40 minutes of venting, she grabbed her bag, said, "You'll regret this," and stormed out. That night, I cried. Not just out of hurt, but because I realized something painful: I had enabled this behavior. In my attempt to give her everything I didn't have growing up, I'd forgotten to teach her the value of boundaries and gratitude. I raised a daughter who believed love came with conditions and money. I didn't sleep much. My mind raced with memories of simpler times, her first recital, our movie nights, the letters she used to write me on Mother's Day. Where had that sweet, loving girl gone? And what role had I played in her disappearance? The next morning, I made myself tea and began to write. It wasn't a letter of guilt, nor was it an apology. It was an honest account, from mother to daughter. I wrote about our life, the truth behind my sacrifices, and how love sometimes means saying no. I ended it with something simple: I will always be your mother. And I will always love you. But I will no longer be your safety net. I mailed it to her apartment, unsure if she'd read it, or tear it apart the moment she saw it. A week passed. Then 2. Silence. Then came the phone call. But it wasn't from Emily. It was from her roommate, Jenna. Jenna's voice was calm, almost apologetic. "Hi, Mrs. Green. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I thought you should know what's been going on." My heart skipped a beat. My first thought was, is Emily okay? But Jenna quickly reassured me. She's fine. Physically. But she's been really upset, and honestly, I think she's spiraling. She paused, and then said something I didn't expect. "She read your letter 3 times. She keeps it by her nightstand. She doesn't say anything out loud, but I think it hit her harder than you realize." That conversation with Jenna opened a window I hadn't known was closed. I'd spent weeks feeling like I'd lost my daughter, not just to anger, but to entitlement. But now, maybe there was a chance. Still, I didn't reach out. I wanted Emily to be the one to take the next step. 2 days later, she called. I stared at my phone as it rang. I felt a strange mix of hope and fear. When I answered, her voice was quiet, subdued. "Hi, Mom." I waited. "Hi, sweetheart." Silence. Then a deep breath. I'm sorry. For the way I talked to you. For showing up at your house like that. I was out of line. I closed my eyes and let the relief wash over me like a tide I'd been resisting. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It means a lot." She hesitated. "I didn't realize how much I'd been taking from you until I saw it in writing. I guess I just always assumed you'd be there to catch me. I didn't even think about how much it was costing you." We talked for over an hour that day. She cried. I cried. And it felt like, for the first time in years, we actually heard each other. But the real climax came weeks later, in a moment neither of us saw coming. Emily had started applying for jobs again, and to my surprise, she'd picked up a part-time gig at a local coffee shop. "Just until something better comes along," she'd said. But I could tell, there was a quiet pride in her voice when she told me she'd earned her first paycheck without my help. Then came the afternoon she called, her voice buzzing with energy. "Mom, I need to tell you something crazy." She'd been at the shop when an older woman came in, clearly distressed. Her card had been declined, and she didn't have enough cash for her coffee and sandwich. She looked so embarrassed, Emily said. So I just covered it. It wasn't much. $10. But the way she looked at me when I handed her the bag, it stayed with me. I smiled. "That was kind of you. I didn't do it for credit. I think I finally understood how hard it must have been for you. All those years. Working late. Stretching every dollar. And you never once made me feel like a burden. I never said thank you for that. Not really." Tears welled in my eyes. But she wasn't done. "That woman came back the next day," Emily said. She handed me an envelope and said, "This is for the kindness you showed me when I needed it." Inside the envelope was a handwritten note and a business card. The woman owned a mid-sized marketing firm and was looking for someone young and driven to bring on as a communications assistant. "I have an interview next week, Mom." "Can you believe that?" I laughed through my tears. "Yes. I can believe that. I always knew you were capable." That week felt like a shift in the universe. Emily seemed lighter, more focused. She started calling me just to talk, not to ask for anything, but to share how her day went or laugh about something silly her coworker said. She even invited me to visit her. "I want to cook for you for once," she said. When I arrived at her apartment, it was like stepping into a different world. The place was modest, but clean. She had a tiny herb garden on the windowsill, a corkboard with job listings and motivational quotes on the wall, and a bookshelf with a sticky note that read, "For Mom, love you." Dinner was simple, pasta and salad, but delicious. And afterward, she handed me a small box. Inside was a silver bracelet engraved with 4 words, "Thank you for everything." I held it in my hands, speechless. She leaned over and hugged me tight. I didn't get it before. I thought love was supposed to be about saying yes to everything. But now I know, sometimes love means letting someone fall so they learn how to rise. I stayed the night, and we talked until 2 a.m. We went through old photo albums, laughed about her teenage phase, and cried again when she told me she never realized how lonely I must have been during all those years I was giving everything to her. It wasn't just an apology. It was a reconnection. A recognition of everything that had gone unsaid between us for too long. I knew we still had a lot to work through, but for the first time in a long time, I no longer felt like I had lost my daughter. She had simply grown up, and found her way back. The silence in the room after Emily stormed out was deafening. I stood there for a moment, gathering myself, still stunned by the venom in her voice. I'd raised her with love, protected her from every storm I could, only to be accused of being a failure, of abandoning her when I simply said no. As I walked back into the kitchen, my hands trembled. Not from fear or sadness, but from something deeper, heartbreak mixed with disbelief. That evening, I didn't call her. For years, I had been the one to apologize first, to smooth things over, to ensure the peace in our home and our relationship. But this time, I needed her to sit with her anger. I needed her to understand that there are consequences to the way we speak to those who care for us. 2 days passed. No text. No call. I checked my phone obsessively even though I told myself I wouldn't. On the 3rd morning, I got a message from my sister, just checking in. "Emily showed up here crying, saying you kicked her out emotionally." What happened? My chest tightened. I knew my daughter. I knew she'd twist the story to make herself the victim. She always did when things didn't go her way. But I also knew this wasn't entirely her fault. Somewhere along the way, I'd failed to set boundaries. I'd given and given until she believed she was entitled to receive. Instead of responding to my sister immediately, I drove over to her house. Emily was curled up on the couch, eyes puffy, tissues piled beside her. The moment she saw me, she sat up straight, almost defensively. "Mom," she started, but I raised a hand gently. "I'm not here to fight," I said calmly, sitting across from her. "But I need you to listen." She nodded, reluctantly. I looked at her for a moment, trying to see the little girl I used to braid hair for, the teenager I waited up late for, the young woman I'd watched struggle through college and heartbreak. I saw her, but I also saw someone who'd grown into an adult who didn't fully grasp responsibility. "I've helped you as much as I could," I began. "I paid for your degree. I helped with your car. I covered your rent the last 3 months without complaint. But when I said no this time, you yelled at me. You called me names. You said I failed you. I paused. That broke me, Emily. Because I've given you my heart, my effort, my everything. Tears formed in her eyes again, but she didn't interrupt. I'm not your bank. I'm not your punching bag when life gets tough, I continued. I'm your mother. I will always love you. But I won't support behavior that punishes me for setting a boundary. Her lips quivered, and she finally whispered, I didn't mean what I said. I know, I replied softly. But words matter. And the truth is, you're not a child anymore. You're 26. If you want to live independently, then you need to actually be independent. That means making rent, owning your choices, and learning how to manage hardship without expecting someone to save you. She looked down, her fingers gripping a tissue tightly. I felt like I was drowning. And I didn't know how to ask for help without sounding desperate. I reached forward and took her hand. Desperation isn't weakness, Emily. But demanding help with cruelty isn't strength either. The room fell quiet again. Then she said something I never thought I'd hear from her. I'm sorry, Mom. I was scared. And I lashed out. That's not who I want to be. For the first time in a long while, I believed her. I saw the cracks in her armor, the humility peeking through. Maybe this was the moment she'd grow from. Maybe this was what she needed, not another check, but a mirror. I forgive you, I said simply. But things need to change. I'll always be here for emotional support. But if you need financial help, we sit down, we talk like adults, and we plan together. No more last-minute emergencies. No more entitlement. She nodded, her voice quiet. Deal. That night, I left my sister's house with a heavy heart but a clear mind. Parenting doesn't end when your child turns 18. But it evolves. And sometimes, the hardest thing to do is step back so they can finally stand up. In the weeks that followed, something in our relationship shifted, slowly, but noticeably. Emily began taking on more responsibility. She started working longer hours, budgeting her expenses more thoughtfully, and even picking up freelance gigs online to make up the difference. She didn't complain anymore when I said no to unnecessary purchases or reminded her that rent was due. Instead, she listened, and more importantly, she acted. There were still moments of tension, of course. Growth never comes without friction. But the conversations between us started feeling more adult, more mutual. It wasn't just a parent telling a child what to do anymore, it was a woman guiding another woman toward independence. I won't pretend it was easy. Letting go of the urge to rescue her every time she stumbled was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I had to remind myself that protecting her from discomfort was also protecting her from growth. And I wasn't doing her any favors by stepping in every time life got tough. Looking back, I realized that the moment she yelled at me, the moment I felt most hurt, was also the turning point we both needed. It forced a truth into the light that neither of us had wanted to face, that love without boundaries can become a cage. And that even the most devoted parents must eventually allow their children to feel the weight of their own decisions. Now, when I see Emily, I see resilience. I see a young woman learning to build a life with her own hands, rather than leaning on mine. And while there's still a long road ahead, I know we've taken the first real step, together, but no longer tangled.